Shalom. Some of you know that a couple of weeks ago, I moved into a new apartment, which I'm slowly settling into. Arranging furniture and imagining how to decorate has been a kind of fun pandemic project while I'm stuck at home. And at least for now, I've decided that this room, where I'm currently zooming in from, is my sanctuary. It's also my office and my gym, and basically a storage unit. But tonight, it is my sanctuary. After almost a year of services from home, each of us here has at least one room that becomes a chapel or sanctuary for an hour and change on Shabbat. So I've thought about how to use this room now, how to set it up and decorate it to fill that role, how the physical objects might lend themselves to a more lofty pursuit, which is especially appropriate to consider this week as we read instructions for building the Mishkan in this week's Torah portion. If you need a refresher, the Mishkan is the portable sanctuary that the Israelites take with them as they wander in the desert before building a temple fixed in place. Parashat Shema describes in great detail how this structure should be built, with all kinds of precious items donated as gifts by Israelites whose hearts move them to contribute. Gold and acacia wood and dolphin skins. Now, I don't have any dolphin skins, or much gold for that matter, but in fact, some of the things in this new apartment and in this very room were recently given to me by community members who are looking to get rid of some stuff. So I suppose the parallel to the gifts of the Israelites are or is even more apt. And if any of you are looking to contribute to my Mishkan, you know where to find me. But there is another reason why my process of building a home and decorating this room in particular reminds me of the Mishkan. In the collection of midrashim known as Shmot Rabbah, our ancient sages try to explain what's going on with God's commandment that the people shall build a physical dwelling place for God. Why, as they wander in the desert, is a structure necessary for them to encounter God, the same God who's already done so much for them? The rabbis of the Midrash offer us a parable, comparing the people of Israel to the only daughter of a king, which in this case is God. The daughter marries a prince who wishes to take her to his homeland, which we can imagine as the physical realm. And the king can't really object. His daughter has to get on with her life, has to fulfill her destiny on earth. But the king wants to remain close to her. So he requests that wherever the prince settles down with the princess, they shall keep a special chamber for the king whenever he wants to visit. In this reading, the Mishkan is essentially the second bedroom in the apartment of the Israelites for when their parents come to visit. Unsurprisingly, my mother prefers this reading because why else should I have a second bedroom other than her coming to visit? But I think I like this reading too, although not necessarily for that exact reason. In many of the midrashim about God commanding the people to erect this structure, we get a glimpse of what's going on for God and what God is getting out of this relationship with the Israelites. In that story of the king and the princess, God is able to feel close to the people, even as they pursue their individual and individuated lives. In a subsequent midrash in Shemot Rabbah, God explains that the purpose of this physical structure is to remind the people that even if their eyes lead them astray to idol worship, God remains as a place to which they can always return. One more midrash from this series imagines that when the people sin, God knocks on their doors hoping to be let in. And while God waits for entry through those doors, the Mishkan offers God a place to dwell off the streets. These rabbinic tales give us an insight into God's emotional experience of wanting a physical sanctuary. They allude to the sinfulness of the Israelites, but their primary aim is to depict a God who yearns for intimacy with the people whom God has chosen, to knock on their doors, to call out to them. Often we readers assume that the Israelites needed a sanctuary because without it, They would not be able to access the abstraction of an invisible God. Rashi and many other commentators take this approach, arguing that actually this Mishkan was built after the people mess up and build an idol in the form of a golden calf. That episode actually comes later in Exodus, but that's not important in these commentaries. They assert that the Israelites need a physical place to encounter God because without it, they would make other physical material objects and worship them instead. I think that's probably true, but it doesn't take away from God's needs, which may be even more important. Here we find the famous words, Ve'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Make for me a sanctuary that I shall dwell among them. B'tocham, among them. God doesn't really care about hanging out in the physical room with the dolphin skins. God really just wants to be close to the Israelites, to dwell inside of them. God wants them to see some dimension of the divine within themselves as individuals and as a community. Now, many of you know that I don't often give sermons about God. I usually leave that to Rabbi Timoner. But my own hesitation with God typically is just a mirror of the hesitation that I know that many of you or many of our community members feel when we talk about God. We much prefer to say that we seek justice, we seek truth, we seek knowledge and an awareness of where we come from. We seek those things sooner than we seek God. Those things might be more comfortable for us to talk about. And sometimes if we want to, we do call those things God. I think it's in part because the process of seeking justice feels easier and maybe even more tangible than seeking God. Seeking those things, justice, truth, and knowledge, isn't so concrete all the time, but it is more concrete than seeking God with a capital G. Justice, truth, and knowledge are perhaps our Mishkan, our vicarious way of understanding eternity and how to make meaning in our lives. Maybe instead of seeking God and looking for God in all those places, we should imagine that God is a force that is seeking us, that wants a second bedroom in our hearts, that calls upon us. One of Abraham Joshua Heschel's most famous works is a book entitled God in Search of Man. The title says it all. But there, in that meditation on biblical faith, Heschel offers what he calls the core of all biblical thoughts, writing that God is not a being detached from man to be sought after, but a power that seeks, pursues, and calls upon man. Heschel's point is that we fool ourselves into thinking that God is some being whom we can pursue. God is not something we can believe in or not. Instead, faith is found in what we are called to do, to contribute, to build. In this way, God is an active experience we can create in our lives. Like the Israelites in this Torah portion, each of us might consider the possibility that maybe there is something that we're called to do, to contribute, or to build. Pursuing that purpose, like building a Mishkan, is a way of encountering God. Ask not what God can do for you has a nice American ring to it, and I think it works. So, what can we do for God? It's a concrete question for an abstract topic. What is our unique contribution to the construction of an extra room for the divine in this world? We may have to pay the rent for the extra space, but I think we can afford it. Shabbat Shalom.